Welcome back to the Primary Science Podcast. I'm joined by Professor Lynne Bianchi, Grace Marson, and Paul Tyler. We're going to be exploring the Great Science Share for schools. Now, this is not a new initiative at all. Many of you listening will already know quite a bit about it, and some of you might even have taken part before, but today's about trying to fully understand what it is, how it works, and how you can use it in your own setting for your own purposes. So, Lynne, welcome back to the show for the second round, might I add.
Thank you. That's really great to be back.
And if you guys haven't seen the previous episode with Professor Lynne from way back in season 2, all about great questioning, go and watch it right now. So, Lynne, I wonder if you could start just by telling everyone a little bit about yourself and how the Great Science Share first began.
I will, and I'll try and keep it short. I put my t-shirt on today to try and promote the campaign. So I initially trained as a primary teacher, so that was always my first love, and to be quite honest, is still my love. I taught in a couple of schools here in North Manchester in England, and then moved into higher education, where I've always spent my time working with in-service teachers, anywhere from their first year in their profession to their last, with the sole purpose of improving the way that we teach primary science and also engineering in primary schools as well. And that's now gone on for, well, maybe too many years than I care to admit now, but a long time. Great Science Share has come within the last 10 years of my career, really as a drive to raise the profile of science here in England and now everywhere else, because we were seeing such declines in the profile of science within schools and the amount of time that was being given to science in the curriculum. And there were so many occasions, Tim, where I would be at events or at do's or at, meeting partners, meeting sponsors, meeting teachers, and we're all talking about the same thing. Wouldn't it be great if only it had the same status, if only we could do more? And I thought, well, we're going to have to find a different way of doing this. So I decided to look around at what seemed to be working well in other parts of in other parts of the world. Things like large-scale campaigns, Children in Need, Macmillan Coffee Morning, Red Nose Day. These kind of things really inspired me, because I just thought, look, there's so many people from so many walks of life all rallying towards one mission on one day, and it seemed to really cajole people's interest and motivation. And a chap called Toby Tyler, who you might well know, was the first to hear me walk through the door one morning and say, you know what I need? I think what we need is a global campaign for promoting primary science. And that was probably about the best part of 12 years ago now. And I still pinch myself today, because over that time we've had lots of different people involved, of course Grace and Paul on the call today, and it's evolved to what it is, which is now in over 50 countries, over 870,000 young people registered to participate as of last year. And we're looking forward to what this year can bring.
Nice. Thank you very much, Lynne, for introducing it. And yeah, it really is amazing. It's sort of grown into its own beast almost. So I'm looking forward to really getting into the bones of it. So over to Grace now. Really great to have you with us. I just wonder if you could tell everyone a little bit about your role within the Great Science Share and what you've been working on recently.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you for the great introduction to the campaign at the start of the session. So my role for Great Science Share for Schools is campaign manager, and that means managing the fantastic team we have that work on it. A small team, but a great team of ex-primary teachers like myself, and we write resources, all the marketing, all the comms, everything we do in-house. So yeah, that's my role. But recently, really proud to announce and release our new Great Guided Inquiries. And those people who are familiar with the campaign will know that every year we release brand new Great Guided Inquiries, and these are resources for teachers to be able to teach science inquiry really effectively. And as I say, they're written in-house, but we also collaborate with lots of sector people, with lots of other collaborators, with funders. And so in February we released very recently this year's Great Guided Inquiries, and I have to say, I know I speak on behalf of Lynne as well here, we're really proud of this year's ones. We've gone down a slightly different rebranded route, but we've worked with some fantastic partners, and we've also brought in teachers to help co-write these as well, which we feel is really important because we want these to really meet a need that the teachers have. They're not extra things to go and teach, they are meeting national curriculum needs that teachers have.
Thank you so much, Grace. That sounds really interesting. I'm looking forward to having a look at that myself. Are these great guided inquiries based on year groups, or is it something you can do in any year group? Or
Yeah, so as the campaign's grown and it's become more and more global, we're now in over 50 countries, which is delighted to hear about. The resources are differentiated by age group rather than key stages because of the global nature of the campaign now. Any teacher going onto the website will be able to download age differentiated resources, so 5 to 7, 7 to 11, and we do dip into lower secondary as well, so you'll find 11 to 14 on there.
thank you so much for that, Grace. And over to Paul now. Welcome back. I have to say, I'm very proud to mention this is now your third visit on the show. You're basically a co-host at this point. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, although everyone should know already by now, and your connection to the Great Science Share?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Tim. I'm very honoured to be back for a third time. I feel like I should be thanking people at this point. So since we last spoke, I have moved out of the classroom. I've not left teaching, as I keep reminding people though. Like Lynne and Grace, primary teaching is still, right at the heart of everything that I love and everything I enjoy doing. I've joined Smart STEMs, which is a STEM outreach charity based up here in Glasgow, but working increasingly UK-wide. And our focus is very much on creating links between schools and industry and helping children to see the huge range of careers that are out there across the sort of STEM disciplines, and also have a better understanding of the pathways into those careers. So that's kind of the core of what we do. I realised very early on, working with my two young toddlers in the kitchen, the power of the Great Science Share. And for me, the power is always in its simplicity. That idea of asking questions and finding ways to come up with an answer. And then at school, I decided to, I really wanted to take it into school and get involved. So the first year of it, we did a whole school investigation where we let the children lead it. The children came up with the questions, and everybody in the school, and I was in a large primary school at the time, over 900 pupils, and everybody got involved. We then moved on, and the next year of it, we did a cluster event. So we got all the schools in the cluster to come together and look at different questions and different investigations and different ways of investigating. And then we grew it again to be a local authority event, and we had a kind of Great Science Share conference that year with representatives from 20 primary schools coming along and sharing what they had been doing throughout the year. And throughout the year, I'd been sharing the Great Science Share resources with them, the sort of guided inquiries and the other resources around generating questions. And then we hit lockdown, and I was determined not to stop. So during lockdown, I did a virtual Great Science Share, and we had over 1,000 children across Scotland joined in. And we spent about 2 months collecting questions from children all across Scotland. And we ended up with around about 2,000 questions. And I still have a huge spreadsheet of all these amazing questions. And then we fired the questions out to experts all over the world to answer them. We got some incredible detailed answers back from these experts. And then on the day, I was online all day, and the children just kind of dipped in and out when they wanted to, and we shared the questions with them. We had activities for them to do, and we had a quiz, and we just had a whole day basically of celebrating why questions are so important and why curiosity is so important in science. So Great Science Share has been something that's been really important to me for a number of years, and I've really enjoyed exploring all the different ways of doing it.
What I noticed the most there is you were talking about just from doing it at home all the way up to, nationwide stuff. And I think that's really important to note as well, that this is something anybody can do at home anytime. If a teacher is completely new to Great Science Share, how would you explain the purpose behind it?
So what is the Great Science Share to a novice teacher? It is simply an opportunity to encourage a child to ask, investigate and share a scientific question they care about, that they're bothered about. It can be anything as simple as just saying to them, what science inquiry, science practical have you done this year that you'd like to do again? That just leafing back through their science book and said, if you could, spend another little bit of time on something, what would you love to do? And they'll either recall something that they've done this year with you, or they might recall something that they did with a teacher in a previous year. Oh, do you remember when Mr. Such a Body did this, or Mrs. Such a Body did that? And it's just then giving them a little bit more time to find their own way through that. So, yeah, ask the question, give them a chance to figure out and talk about with a partner or with you about how they might go about it, collect some data, and then find a way to share it. Like Paul said, it's either, you can literally just share it back through a dialogue. You can share it with a friend. It can share it in an assembly. You can share it through a set of photos you want to put on social media. You can share it by making little podcasts. We've had lots of podcasts recently from Malta, small island off Sicily, who that's the way that they do it. We are an extremely inclusive campaign. As long as we stick to the values of the campaign, people can morph this as much as they wish. And what I mean by the values of the campaign is that it needs to be child-led. So we try and encourage teachers to stand back a little bit, just give a little bit of freedom, not to be as prescriptive as maybe feel like we need to be sometimes within the curriculum. But it's non-competitive, so we're not pitting a child off against another child. We're not coming out with who's best, or, who came second or third, and making that child who came fourth or didn't place think, oh, mine wasn't very good. This is about every child having a go and being valued for whatever stage that they're at, and that's the same with schools and teachers. So it's really simple. Keep saying it, ask, investigate, and share a scientific question. Anything that they wish to investigate. Which flowers have I got the most of in my garden? All the way through to maybe one of the guided inquiries, or something that they've done, or something that's pertinent to their context.
Nice, thank you, Lynn. It's almost like it's modelling how a good science lesson at school might look like as well. It's inclusive, it's what the children want to know more about, and it's, a good scientific process.
Yeah, it is. And, I suppose what we've not said on the elephant in the room is, why did we create all of this? I mean, the campaign is a Trojan horse, really. Grace often hears me sort of use this kind of term because it's a means by which we can communicate to primary teachers what we think and what we believe is high quality primary science education, and what it means to do high quality practical work. So those real world links, those career related learning aspects within there, really going for the tricky bits. Why are we doing investigations when children already know the answer, or they're not finding out anything new, or they're not developing a new skill? So all of the resources and the inquiries that Grace mentioned are models of best practice. So this is teach professional development by stealth. And when you see it play out with the young people, it's formative assessment by stealth, isn't it? You'll be able to listen, see the children, how they're working, what they get stuck on. Do they get stuck with drawing a table when they get to that point of recording data? They've got a number, they don't know where to put it. Or do they get stuck right at the beginning with, how do you even ask a question? How do you ask a question that leads to getting some evidence? How do you draw a conclusion at the end? And so all of the resources are there for a teacher to dip in and dip out of, and are very much, a teacher professional development activity, really, that teachers at any point can dip into. And it's all free because we've got some fantastic sponsors and we've got some amazing support from the University of Manchester. So none of this is at a cost to anyone. And I think that's also what makes it very special.
I know that we've probably answered quite a bit of this already, but from your perspective, when you work with schools and teachers, what makes this approach so powerful for the kids?
Yeah, so now obviously it is part of my role to promote the campaign, and I'm obviously very happy to do so. But I think Paul beats me by about a year there, Paul, in that I took part in Great Science Share still as a classroom teacher, as a science lead in a school in Stoke-on-Trent, probably in its second year that it was going. And what I saw there, Tim, was really powerful for the children who, in the school I taught at, didn't have high science capital, didn't always see the relevance of science in the curriculum. So when we took part in this, and as Lynne says, when I gave them that freedom to ask their own questions, I got all sorts of questions, wild and wonderful questions. Not all of them scientific questions, but we were able to work on that. And what I saw in that school that year, that very first year we took part, was just the buzz of science, not only for the children, but for the teachers as well. For the children to be able to ask their own question, we know that that makes them more motivated in class to engage with science. They felt they could ask any question. They saw the relevance of science to their lives. And I think in that very first year, I had a year 3 class, and one of them asked a question. We were learning about plants at that time of the year, and they wanted to find out whether music made plants grow better. So, we all do put the plants in the cupboard, we all do change the environment, all that kind of thing. But I'd never heard that before, and Great Science Share had enabled the opportunity for that one child to ask that question. And before I knew it, we were every day playing Bruno Mars to a plant at the speakers at the whiteboard because we followed that line of inquiry. And I knew, my subject knowledge told me that probably no, music doesn't make a difference. They'd heard it on the news somewhere, or they'd seen it in the media that someone plays or sings to their plants, and they were curious about that. So Great Science Show allowed us then as a class to follow that. And you can only imagine the motivation every lunchtime after they came in. Come on, miss, you've got to play the music to the plant again at the same time we played the same song. Very sick of Bruno Mars by the end of that half term. But yeah, there's the power, there's the motivation for that class of children just to see the relevance of science to their lives. And as Lynne said there, every guided inquiry we put out now has that global context. We're weaving in the UN SDGs to link to sustainability issues that matter on a global scale. So sometimes children might think, what's the point of that curriculum? Why are we learning about this? And I think what we're able to show them is there is a point. There is a context that this matters in, that what you're learning in school will matter to you, whether you pursue a career in STEM or whether you're a global citizen that really need to know about these things.
Thank you very much for that, Grace. Talking about how these great experiments and inquiries work at school, I wanted to go over to Paul there. And, you were talking about doing these big initiatives and projects with 2,000 kids, but I wanted to ask a bit more about how the structure plays out just in an everyday classroom with, 25 kids across the year. What kinds of things might you be doing?
So I think in a classroom setting, which is kind of where I would encourage, teachers to start, it can really be a sort of year-long focus with, the Great Science Share day at the end of it, being your opportunity to sort of share with a wider audience. So you can build up using the Great Science Shares resources, which are all available on their website. And there's a huge suite now of resources that they've created over the years that really help teachers to develop children's scientific questioning. And, I think as we all sort of appreciate, questioning is at the heart of science. It's at the heart of investigation and exploration, and pretty much everything that we know as a species has come from people asking great questions, and sometimes not great questions as well. I always had a quote on my classroom wall, and it was something that a 9-year-old girl had said to me a few years ago. They said, "Thank you for teaching us that scientists don't need to be clever, they just need to be curious." And I absolutely love that. And for me, that really underpins everything that the Great Science Share is about. So across the course of a year, as you go through all your science topics and everything else, and as Grace says, the questions don't always need to be brilliantly about science. It's getting children just to ask good, well-structured questions that they've really thought about. So just the ability to develop children's confidence across the year, asking scientific questions, that they've started to think about the structure, and they've started to think about how can we find an answer out to this, and then giving them that confidence to plan and carry out investigations, Sometimes it might be that actually their question requires some research rather than a hands-on investigation, a bit of digging around, a bit of research, reading some books, having a look on the internet, maybe asking someone who's an expert in a particular field. And as children get more and more confident structuring really good scientific questions that can be investigated, you find that their motivation when they're doing the practical science goes up. And the other thing that goes up is their motivation to then share what they have discovered. And I think that's then the kind of the culmination of it. So if you think in a classroom throughout the year, if you've had the Great Science Share as your kind of endpoint, that's your goal. That's the day you're going to share what you've done. You maybe invite parents into the school and share with them. You maybe get the children to go out to other classes around the school and share with them, or maybe there's a big assembly to share with, or maybe it's something online. And you build up to that point, and all the way through the year, you are working with the children. You're helping them to really structure those really good scientific questions. And that for me is a really powerful kind of motivator throughout the year for children.
It sounds almost like, in addition to all of the great inquiries, resources, it's almost like Lynn said before, it's almost like building a culture, way of thinking, right? That you don't just, let's do the Great Science Share now for this one activity and then we're done. It's a full way of thinking, way of doing science, and a culture you're building in the classroom, as well as the great resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we need to move away from science as just being a body of knowledge. Science isn't a body of knowledge. Science is a way of thinking. And I think what the Great Science Share does really well is it exemplifies that in a way that is accessible for the youngest children. And I think that is so important. And if we can have a generation of children, the Great Science Share generation of children coming through into STEM careers, they're going to have that mindset and that way of thinking. And that's far more powerful than having a generation of kids coming through who just know lots of stuff.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You've talked a lot about the children getting to know that their questions are going to be shared. This endpoint's coming. We're going to get to share what we've been doing. Have you got any great examples of this playing out in your classroom?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that motivation of sharing beyond the classroom is huge. And it can be a real boost for children knowing that. So I've run assemblies at school, Great Science Share assemblies, where representatives from each class come up and they share what their question was and how they investigated it and what they found out. And we would normally invite parents along to those assemblies as well. So you're kind of growing that audience. One year we did a Great Science Share showcase as part of our STEM evening. And so we had examples of the questions and the investigations and the findings from every class across the school. 32 classes sharing their work, and hundreds of parents coming around and looking at it. One of the things that social media really lets you do is reach experts in different fields who you'd never be able to reach normally. And so that's a real motivator as well for children, knowing that their question has been put out and has been answered by somebody who's been working in this particular field for 20 years, and that person has valued that question, answered it. So yeah, I think having an audience is a really powerful motivator, and it should be, because at the end of the day, science and science investigation and science research is nothing if it's not shared.
I'll just build on really what Paul said, because I think what we've noticed over the past few years, I suppose at the beginning we were just like, ask loads of questions, and all of that, and it was just really exciting time to get everybody involved. But more so lately, the resources, what we call the Great Science Toolkit. So these are sort of downloadable things you can use all year, but if you're struggling to encourage children to understand how to write a prediction, there's a few prompts there to help them to do that, and what progression looks like. But some of the other bits that we've been really working on is that when children are sharing, that they can actually start to evaluate through that process, rather than just saying, well, this is the data I found, but really starting to get them to interrogate that. So what's the limitations of that? What were the pros and cons of the actual activity that they did, or the investigation that they did? what was it the right type of equipment used at that point? Could it have been better? Could it have been worse? And actually that metacognition then that comes in when they're talking about their learning has really come out more strongly as the years of the Great Science Show have gone on, and we've sort of honed, year on year, you sort of do more and different. But yeah, it's beyond just ask a question, just let everybody lob in there and just do anything. But it really has given that scaffold and that backbone to each part. But I think real power, as you say, Paul, when children are practicing and rehearsing, talking to people about what they've done, there's even more questions then that come later in terms of, so what's that led on to? How could have done that better? If they modelled something, as we see off in the digestive system, then they are starting to say, well, this is good, but this isn't. There are other ways that we can have a look at this model. This is the limitations of it. And so it's really enabled us to bring out that evaluative part, the plan, do and review, that I think maybe sometimes gets lost in the day-to-day rush that goes on, and then obviously the questioning that comes. So I do think it's a bit like the school performance, the Christmas play or the prom. You're getting ready for it, they're practicing for it, and so when you get to it, they're really shining and really proud to actually share what they've got, and actually are not bothered if things haven't worked. That it isn't all about perfection. They'll really be great characters when things have gone wrong or didn't quite happen the way that they thought it would.
Yeah, that's when we sort of learn the most sometimes. And I think there's no doubt in my mind, at least, that this is something everyone should be getting involved in some way. But I wonder, Grace, if you could help us with this. So if I'm a busy teacher, right, I'm listening to this show, I'm thinking, okay, sounds brilliant, gonna have a go, but what do I actually do? Like, where do I start?
Yeah, great question, Tim. So it's really important to say this isn't loads of extra work for any teacher anywhere. They're already doing this. It's about kind of using the Great Science Share resources. I've got one here, so here's one I prepared earlier. So we've got one of my favourites. So we've got the question teller, and anyone from the late 80s, 90s will remember using those on playgrounds to ask your friends what your favourite colour, or do you have any pets? But what we've done here is make it more sciencey. So we've already talked a lot about children asking their own questions, and some teachers say to us, I just don't know where to start with that even, and that's fine. Go to the Great Science Show website, sign up, and you'll be able to access what we call the toolkit on there. And every single resource in there is designed to help teachers scaffold those working scientifically skills. So this one, asking questions. I would say for any teacher who wants to take part this year and doesn't quite know where to start, don't feel you've missed the boat, you really haven't. As I said, those great guided inquiries got launched in February, very recently. So a lot of teachers use those as a starting point. So rather than feel you have to go and generate loads of questions from your class and your school, you could use those as a starting point because they've been written for you. They model that brilliant scientific inquiry we want teachers to be modelling, and they can then provide stimulus for further questions. And there's lovely themes. There's one about animals, there's one about science skills. We've got a very exciting one coming in March. So yeah, that's a good starting point. Or as Lynne said before, just looking back through the science book and what investigation have the children really enjoyed that they want to develop more and ask more questions about, because we all know at that moment the timetable is so squeezed, you don't have that time to do more once you've completed what you've completed in the lesson. So yeah, lots of ways in which you can start, but Paul's mentioned it can be small. So when I first took part, it was just in my own class to trial it as a subject lead. Then the next year, the whole school took part. Then we started buddying up with a local school nearby and the local high school. So you start small. We value any Great Science Share event, whether it's a couple of children in a home ed group or whether it's a huge trust of schools or whether it's an international share. There really is no correct formula other than that ask, investigate, share, and keep in with the values that we've mentioned a lot throughout this podcast, which is non-competitive, inclusive, and collaborative.
Thank you so much. You mentioned earlier that the Great Science Share for Schools is obviously free to take part in, but that's because you have sponsors. What part have they played in building this initiative?
Okay. Well, we have very few sponsors. We've probably got a huge amount of supporters, and you can see all of these at the bottom of the webpage. And I mean, this has been massively significant. From an idea, how do you grow an idea? How do you grow an idea at scale? And I remember going to talk to the university, obviously, that we're based in Manchester University, but you'll not see anything about Manchester University and the branding and things like that. But, Nancy Rothwell, Dame Professor Nancy Rothwell, at that point, she said, Lynne, if you're going to do this, don't do it regionally, do it UK-wide and go really as big as you can. And I thought, how do you do that? And really, that really denotes one of the other values, which is about our collaboration and our collaborative approach to everything that we do. Grace mentioned it around the guided inquiries, and collaboratively working with different teachers and different organisations. But I've obviously got to say a huge thank you to everybody who has, in any small way, they contributed to sharing a tweet, in the days of Twitter, putting a LinkedIn post, sharing something with their network, mentioning it to a friend, all the way through to the organisations that we've got involved, who will share through newsletters and support, and people like Paul in Scotland, regional champions that we've had in the past. This has come about because everybody has seen something that they valued as well and believed in, and I can't, as I say, can't thank them enough, can't thank you enough. You're doing this for free in your own time because you've got also a passion in this space, and that's what we've managed to latch onto. We've recently had from UNESCO, has been tremendous, an organisation that I think we all aspired to at one point but never knew how to get involved with, but because of the inclusive nature of the campaign, because of the power of upscaling it at free cost, and it's open to everybody and there's no caveat there, then UNESCO came behind us, and for the last 3 years have given us national patronage because we emulate the values that they also stand for and link with the global goals. So I think all of these different pieces make a big jigsaw puzzle, which we've still not completed because there's still lots of bits to put in. So any organisation can come and email us, get in touch if they want to in any way support, whether it's through comms or whether it's through running something or whether it's about talking about an activity that they would like to promote within it. Yeah, it's amorphous in that way.
Yeah, it's fantastic how it's grown. Sadly, that brings us full circle and it's time to wrap up. But first, I did just want to say a huge thank you to Lynne, Grace and Paul for giving up your time and coming on and sharing your stories and the main purpose behind the Great Science Share for Schools. And of course, how teachers everywhere can and must get involved, including myself. So I'm going to put all the links, all the information in the description. So anybody watching, you can explore everything there is to look at your leisure. So thank you everybody for listening, and we will see you next time on the Primary Science Podcast. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.